Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. While we were sitting, I saw a note flash up from below, and it said, "Good morning. I'm trying to find equilibrium after last night's debate." I want to just touch on that for a minute, because the debate was like trying to wash and wax a cat. Most notable for its absolute lack of respect for norms, grace, the subliminal threat, the overt threat of telling the Proud Boys to stay back and stand by. But if you go for it, if you lose track of what's right in front of you, you're in your own living room. I've got my dogs on either side of me. I made a little dinner. I loved my dinner. I loved my dogs. I watched about 20 minutes, and then I turned it off. It was an affront. It was an assault. And watching it was not going to make it any better. And it was only going to destabilize my state of mind, lead me to write cranky letters to the editor, which no one publishes, or fret, or talk about it on Facebook, which would just help the Russians weaponize Facebook. So I encourage you to be careful with your state of mind. That's the one thing you don't want to let people take away from you. Don't forget where you are. You're watching these guys on television, like a little puppet show. You could be watching Howdy Doody. And yeah, there are consequences, but they're not here now. They're coming. Very often I imagine that I was living in the Middle Ages. And in the Middle Ages, where the leading cause of death was murder, people got up, they took care of the animals, they farmed, there was no radio, there was no TV, everything was quiet. And it was not until some breathless neighbor came racing over the hill on a sweating horse and said, "They're here," that the idea of an invading enemy or a threat really permeated. And sometimes I think it's pretty good to remind ourselves of that. Take a minute. The crows are still crapping on my fence. The little gnat catchers are still eating out of my seeds. My dogs are sound asleep. You can see Chico down in the left corner, lower left corner of the screen, and Pablo behind him. And I'm talking to my friends. And, this is life. And all this stuff has always existed. It's always going on. I think what's unsettling is that for many years we lived in the kind of myth of American exceptionalism where we thought we were somehow immune. We could do what we wanted anywhere in the world, and nothing could come back and bite us. We were on a continent far away, and we stood by. We stood by for a lot of stuff. Stood by for 250 years of slavery. We stood by for Jim Crow laws. We stood by for the colonization of Latin America, for this, sending of American troops in to fight the hungry in favor of the fat. And basically what's been happening to the third world is now starting to happen here. They're going to frack in your backyard whether you want to or not. They're going to put Facebook unregulated into your computer whether you want it or not. It's hard not to use because all your friends and peers are using it. And it's harder even to actually consider that it's been weaponized. And it's been weaponized very skillfully to cause discord in the American people. And even when we venture an opinion that's consonant with our own opinion, it's being used, it's being thrown up against other opinions to create disharmony and upheaval. So the place where we have to start settling is into ourselves. We have to settle ourself on ourself. We do this by meditating. And this leads me to the idea of karma, which is what I wanted to talk about. So one of our group, Eric Clark actually, sent me this question. He said, my family's close with a young woman who was just killed, along with another young woman, a college friend of hers. Both 22 years old and recent college graduates, by what's been reported to be a medically compromised driver, possibly a drunk driver, who ran a red light, hit their car, and pushed it into oncoming traffic. Both of these young women suffered severe burns from the resulting fire, and both didn't die right away, but within 24 hours of the accident. She was a sweet young woman with great promise, and from what I hear, her friend was as well. When things like this happen, it brings up all the big questions. I know the First Noble Truth addresses this. First Noble Truth is suffering exists. It's not a fake. It's not fake news. You spoke in a previous talk about dependent origination. I might not have that right, but is that karma? Right now, so many things are happening that don't seem fair, aren't fair actually. I'm old enough to know not to expect things to be fair in life. Nevertheless, when something like this happens, it's disturbing, and the issue of not fair comes up. How does Zen Buddhism address this? Quick quiz. Who's the American that uses the word not fair more often than anyone else? It's Donald Trump. If I feed one of my dogs and don't feed the other, the one that's not fed looks hurt. There is some natural impulse toward balance. But there's nothing in the universe that's actually personal, and it's hard to remember that. So what karma actually means is consequences. And it kind of began to be used under Hinduism, and it was attached really early on to this idea of rebirth. You know, that you're going to have lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and no matter what happens in this lifetime, whatever happens in this lifetime, will determine the rebirth that you have. So poor people are poor because they were behaved badly in a former life. And noble, rich people, I suppose like our president, are elevated in power because they live nobly and selflessly in another life. You don't have to live very long on earth to realize that that's a crock. But there is some, and there's also an ethical construct to karma, which is, you know, good actions will produce a good life. Bad actions will produce a bad life. I think that's pretty demonstrable on some level. So an action can be a thought that's engaged and acted on. It can be an action. It can be an intention. It can be a completed action. But if we look at the universe from a personal point of view, if we forget that despite our self-awareness as an individuated being, that we've also never been separated from the rest of it. If we forget that part of it, we fall prey to the kind of human delusion that we're a separate, graspable entity. And Hinduism, Christianity, Atman, spirit, soul, all of these things are kind of extensions of the belief in a permanent self. It's comforting. But if nothing else is permanent, why should we be permanent? You can destroy anything, but all of it. So one way to look at karma is kind of the way I look at heaven and hell. It was used to kind of control people's actions and say, if you're good, you'll go to heaven, angels, lots of good food and music, all the people are beautiful. Or you go to hell. But if you think about it for 5 minutes, you'll see that heaven and hell are right here on earth. There are scenes on earth that surpass hell in their grotesqueness and their suffering and their pain. And the earth itself is so sublimely beautiful, and the creatures that inhabit it are so sublimely beautiful. What more do you need of heaven? So the first thing I'd like to suggest is that if you look at karma from the standpoint of a little kernel of self, a little acorn with your name on it, tucked under your spleen, nothing's going to work. I've met Tibetan Rinpoches who are reincarnated people. That's what Rinpoche means. I've met several and talked to them. And they all smile and shrug and say, I have no idea. They told me this. They told me I was reincarnated 4th century monk. Who knows? Zen people don't pay much attention to reincarnation because nobody knows. None of it's provable. So we concentrate on what's right here, what's right now. And in that focus of attention, you can actually affect karma. So let's look for a second at fair and unfair. When a fox eats a rabbit, is it fair or unfair? Both are involved in a dance, and both understand their role in it. The rabbit doesn't begrudge the fox for killing it. It'll do its best to live. The fox doesn't begrudge the rabbit for running away, nor does it begrudge the eagle that picks it up and takes it away. So on this earth, we're all playing roles, we're all interacting with one another, and there's every kind of intention imaginable, from Mother Teresa to Hitler, that's being danced out, every possibility of the human mind. Now, there's no argument with consequence. So let's look at a guy like Donald Trump. And we think, my God, here's a guy who's, stolen, swindled people, abused women, been accused of rape multiple times, settled suits. We find out he's in $300 million in debt personally that are due to come, that he pays no income tax, that he's vulgar, that he's inconsiderate, that he's brutal, that he's a bully, and yet he's the President of the United States. How fair is that? Well, I think you have to look with a finer microscope and try to imagine for a minute what Donald Trump's moment-to-moment existence is. So in Buddhism, it's often represented as a circle with various states of being. And the first being, let's start at the top or at midnight. It's called the heaven realm. Think of Richard Gere, think of movie stars, think of Claire Danes, people that live with wealth and fame and the best of everything. Everything's clean, sweet, people are coming to them, making obeisance. But from a Buddhist point of view, you can't be enlightened from that realm because there's always the fear of losing it, which is inherent. There's always a kind of grasping. And from my years in Hollywood, I can attest to how fixated people are on their standing, on their status, on their comparison to other people. and how superstitious they are in many cases of being with people who are less than them, as if it might taint them. Then the next realm is called asuras. And asuras are very, very powerful beings. They're very jealous. They're full of competition, backstabbing, and scheming. Trump would be an asura. Henry Kissinger would be an asura. Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney. These guys are like very, very powerful forces. Again, not a realm you can be enlightened in. Then there's the human realm. And the human realm is where enlightenment is possible. It's a realm of struggle. It's a realm of hard work. It's a realm of multiplicities, complications, sweat of your brow. But it's also the place where we're permeable to wisdom, where we can look at it, where we can see it, where we can catch our attachments, and we can see examples of other people who have liberated themselves from being stuck by its flypaper. Then there's a realm called the hungry ghosts. And hungry ghosts are people so afflicted by greed, they're defined as people with mouths the size of suitcases and throats the size of needles. And everything they touch turns to pus. They can't be satisfied. We've all known people like that. Then there's the animal realm, the realm of kill or be killed, hunt or be hunted, always on the alert, always watchful, powerful beings, many skills and talents that we don't have, but no concept of enlightenment, no way for them to get off the wheel of life and death, birth and death. And then there's a realm called the hell realms, where suffering is so acute, so all-consuming, that people never have the leisure time or the free moments to consider enlightenment or spiritual growth. So that's a really early Buddhist description of the various states of people. It's pretty descriptive. But Hindus and early Buddhists, and certainly a lot of Christians, like to make it a cautionary tale. If you do badly in this life, you will have another life as you, and you will be punished for it then. And I think one of the reasons that they do that is to try to keep to work against the kind of apparent nihilism of emptiness. You know, if nothing's real, why not rape, kill, and pillage? If everything is transitory and illusory, why all this stress on compassion? Because if your insight is really deep, you will perceive all of it as precious as you, as part of you. And the idea of harm or destruction or wanton cruelty is just, it doesn't arise. It's only in kind of superficial states of insight that you find people who are without empathy or without kindness. So for us to expect the universe to correspond to our ideas of fairness, it's really kind of a delusion. Yesterday, I heard a podcast on the New York Times Daily. It's about the only thing I can get in my terrible car radio. So I listened to this podcast by a fellow who was charting migrations within America due to climate change. And it turns out there are hundreds of millions of people preparing, I should say tens of millions of people preparing to move, because they can see the writing on the wall. They're either going to be underwater or without water, or in a place where they can't grow crops, or in a place where it's too hot to work outside. They're not going to be able to live. And this pressure of climate change is only exacerbating economic and racial tensions, because it's the wealthy people that can pick up and go to Michigan, go someplace where it's cooler and balmier and not yet overcrowded. And it's poorer people that are going to be stuck in these unlivable places with less of a tax base and an eroding infrastructure. So you could call that a global karmic result. But I don't think it's exactly global. There are a lot of people in the world that are not burning a lot of carbon, that are living on $1 a day. And it's the developed nations who are warming the atmosphere and acidifying the seas. And it's the industrial nations that are going to have to give up stuff. And if we don't give up stuff, we're going to suffer from the universal climate change that's going to hurt everyone. And there may be short-term escapes for this, till your kids are grown, perhaps. But my granddaughter's going to live in a world with 35% less oxygen. It's going to be living at 12,000 feet because the plankton in the ocean is disappearing due to its warming and acidity. And that's the greatest generator of oxygen on the planet. So we're in it whether we want to be or not. We're in it whether we change all our light bulbs to LED and put up solar panels and drive electric cars. We're in it. This is the karma of our me culture, of our indulgence culture. I'm not exempting myself from this, by the way. I mean, I live in a 1,700 square foot house. I could probably bring more people in here to live. But this is the culture we grew up with. This is our normal. So during the 60s, we were creating communes. We were trying to learn how to live together. We were trying to learn to live on less. In some way, predicting that this day was coming. And we were laughed at and we were, derided. Meanwhile, everybody started to eat organic food. Everybody started to follow alternate medical procedures, homeopathy, naturopathy, acupuncture. People are following alternative spiritual paths, yoga, various kinds of Buddhism, Wicca. People are doing everything except giving stuff up, except consuming less. And it's the consumption that keeps plastic being generated, that keeps hundreds of millions of cows burping and farting and throwing carbon gases up into the universe. And I think nobody knows how to stop without being kind of a kook, without being some kind of an eccentric. And so the whole train just keeps running on until people actively begin to consider what to do. The only thing that I've been able to come up with, I've done all the, I have solar panels, I charge my car electrically, I've got battery backups on my house. Stop. My phone was turned off. You do all the things that you think you can do, pretty much a vegetarian. But it's not enough. I don't have air conditioning, but it's not enough. And so you try to imagine, what could I do? What could we do to create enough pressure on policymakers and on the wealthy and powerful that call the shots? What could we do? Because you can see that a whole class of people of a certain age have made a decision to die with their toys and with their power intact. They figure won't live until the real climate change costs come due. But everybody's getting a wake-up. I mean, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of homes burned in California. We have people who are refugees that were upper middle class citizens yesterday, burned out. Nobody in Northern California doesn't know people who are homeless, hasn't opened their home to people needing a shower or a place to stay. And yet, because we never know how things are going to turn out, I call this radical optimism. You can say incontrovertibly that we never know how things are going to turn out. So given that, I can remain optimistic because it's a more powerful option than depression. And since I don't know how things are going to turn out, I might as well keep my shoulder to the wheel, because it's like buying a lottery ticket. If I don't buy a lottery ticket, there's no chance I could ever win. If I do buy a lottery ticket, I might win. So I keep coming back to one thing, and I'm sort of interested in feedback about this. The only thing I can think of that would actually get the attention of all the people we need to get the attention of, not Congress. Congress are employees of the 1/10%. That's who pays for them to go to Washington. We give them the votes, which are like high school hall passes. And they do focus groups, and they learn the buzzwords and the issues that we're interested in. And we vote for them, and they go to Washington, and they begin their real work, which is paying back their donors. And they do that in ways that are invisible to us voters. They do it through tax legislation and through legislation loopholes in the tax law, in renewing patents. Things we can't even comprehend. Somebody gives $50,000 to a legislature, and that guy helps them renew a patent for 17 years, which is worth multiple billions of dollars. The rate of return on that investment is extraordinary. So none of us can match that. So the only thing I can think of that is both Buddhist and ethical and compassionate is something like a general strike, where people make a general commitment to stop shopping, to get by on as little as they possibly can, as a challenge. Can I buy 2 gallons of gasoline? Can I buy just enough groceries? Can I not buy any new clothes, any new toys, any new bangles? Can I trade for novelty? And my thinking is that in about 2 weeks, you would have the attention of everybody that depends on consumers, which is all of us, buying their stuff. Because when I think about it, it seems to me that a consumer society, which I'm told is what we have, is a perfect one-way valve to deliver all income to the people that own the means of making stuff. So our money's always going one way. We get a little bit in salary, but then the money all goes back to buy toys and tools and things we need from the people that are making sure that we never actually get enough to not work for them. So if we stopped buying, it would be like saying, we see this game, we see what's happening. I think about that little Swedish girl, Inga, maybe? I mean, it's easy at 14 to take a stand like that. I don't say easy. I don't mean to disparage it. But she doesn't have tuition. She doesn't have a mortgage. She doesn't have, a lot of the responsibilities of an adult. But those adults with responsibility also have children and grandchildren. And when you realize that your grandchild is going to be breathing 30 to 40% less oxygen before she's 40, it really builds a kind of incentive to do something to change the karma of the culture. So to think about it in terms of karma is every little act of self-sacrifice is actually an act of liberation. Every little act of not going along with the dominant paradigm of doing stuff we don't like to do and then rewarding us by buying toys, every time, every little way that we can cut back from that is an act of liberation to the planet, is an act of generosity toward our children and grandchildren. And it may not seem like much. I'm sure a grain of sand doesn't seem like much. But if you get enough grains of sand, you have a beach. And democracy is based on getting more grains of sand in your bucket than they've got in their bucket. But the problem is when you don't look with a really fine attention, with a really quiet mind, while you're going out in the street to protect Black Lives Matter or other citizens, trans people, transgender people, gay people, you're buying a jet ski or a truck or a new Game Boy or something. It's human. You know, we all do it. And it's an act of discipline and will. So to cut those impulses off in your mind is where meditation comes in. And when you meditate, what you're actually doing is letting the karma of those thoughts work on emptiness. And they're completely harmless. They can't do any damage, you know. So if it comes up, I see myself riding in a gold Cadillac. I don't have to buy it. I just let that impulse dissolve into emptiness. It's when those impulses work on us, on our desires and then our actions, that karma is generated. So actually meditation is a very powerful tool for undercutting the whole basis of a greedy, industrialized society where we all use far more of everything than most of the people in the world who are living on less than $2 a day. We're going to have to make big changes, all the industrialized countries. And we have a lot of social inequity. Poor people are already going to feel that compared to their rich, they shouldn't have to give anything up. Maybe they shouldn't. And one way in which we make things more equitable is tax law. We take a little from everybody. Everybody. Donald Trump, not $750, but proportionate little. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. And that money is generated to make good schools, medical care, daycare so that people can work without tension. So I can't say I have a plan. But what I can do is I can meditate and I can let my karmic impulses work on emptiness. And at least they're not doing any harm. And while that's going on, I get to examine what it is that I'm doing, what it is that I want, and consider it from the point of view of how does this play out for other generations? How does this play out for my children and grandchildren? How does this play out for my neighbors? Because until we make this transition from me to we, we've overdone the me. We've overdone the half of reality that's a single serving of ice cream, which is, you know, little Petey Coyote or little Eric Clark. We need to work on the we. We need to work on how we come together and what we can do. And there are many, many cultures on earth that do that, in which the pursuit of states of mind, transcendental states of mind, are for the good of the entire culture. in which wealthy industrialists understand that a strong union actually keeps contented workers on the job and doesn't waste the training you levied on them. So I'm just a Buddhist. I just teach people meditation and how to get out of their own way and how to think about we a little bit and how to create a quiet space where you can let the induced desires of the culture bubble through you harmlessly. Because we're under constant assault by advertisements. We see billions of them by the time we're 12. And they play on us. They play on our ideas of body image. They play on our fears of body odors or toe fungus or whatever it is. They're in there to make you buy something. So I think we have to come up with some alternatives, and I'm not smart enough to come up with the alternative, but I'm open enough to join others. It has to be more than just the giving of money. I remember when Al Gore was running for president, he didn't have solar panels on his house. He was running as an environmentalist. He didn't have solar panels on his house. So we have to be consistent, and we have to work out ways of living that are sustainable. And I think they'll look quite different. I think we'll look a lot less rich and fancy and polished than we do now. But the plus will be that we will join the mass of humanity, and we'll give up some of our exceptionalism, and we'll give up some of our ideas of being special and make common cause with other humans trying to save the only planet we have. That's probably enough for today. If you want, join me in this metta prayer. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace.